Hello, lovely ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another Pokemon Draft Concepts video. As per the poll I put up yesterday, we are going to be going over what it means to be drafting for types versus drafting for roles. Something I see a lot in draft is placing overimportance and way too much weight on the actual types of the mon, where, as you'll see later on, I think that's not really what you should be focusing on. So, without further ado, let's just jump right into it. Now, what is drafting for types? Now, this of course refers to when you're drafting, looking at the type of the Pokemon. Looking at, okay, I already have X type and Y type. How do I get this other type that I don't have? Now, this is generally a good guideline, especially when you're starting out on draft. You know, I won't sit here and pretend like that's not like a decent idea, but I think it's generally counterintuitive to how in-depth rosters are constructed, and quality rosters are constructed. Now, that might prompt you to say, but cards, isn't getting a diverse type chart good? Isn't it bad if you have a lot of the same type? Isn't it really good if you have a bunch of different types that your opponent has to worry about? To which I would answer, yes. Exactly. That's a fantastic idea. And your heart is in the right place when you say this, right? I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's a bad idea. Yeah? I'm just saying it's not what your primary focus should be on when you're going into the draft looking to construct a roster. So, that might prompt you to ask, what should I be looking for? To which I would say, drafting for roles. Now, this can be somewhat confusing because Pokemon of the same type often play the same role, alright? Think about drafting Blastoise versus Tentacruel. They're both bulky water types, they're both pivots, and they're both hazard removal, alright? They step on each other's toes a lot, not just because they're both water types, but because they want to be doing a lot of the same things during the draft. Would you ever draft these two at the same time? No, obviously not. You would never draft these two at the same time. Why is that? It's because they play the same roles. And it's not because they share the same typing. To prove that, I would say look at a mon like Inteleon. Now, what is Inteleon's role in a draft? It's a high speed tier, and it's a threatening water type. Now, despite sharing the same typing as Blastoise, would you say that Blastoise's job is to be an efficient speed tier and a threatening water type? Probably not. Can it be a threatening water type? Yes, certainly. Is it an efficient speed tier? Absolutely not. Is it going to be a bulky spinner many weeks? Yes. Is Inteleon ever going to be something even remotely close to a defensive piece on your team like Blastoise? No, he is not. So that's why, if you're looking to draft both of these guys at the same time, it's not completely troll, right? Despite having the same exact typing, they're both mono water, they do completely different things. And that's what you should be looking at when you're looking to go into the draft, alright? Not what typings do I need? Is it troll if I draft two water types at the same time? No. You should be looking at, what do I need? Is it troll if I draft these two different roles at the same time? And be thinking in that kind of context. So, when you're drafting a Pokemon, a more productive line of thinking, rather than does this mon fit the typing I need? Do I need to check off this box of X typing or Y typing? You would rather think, does this fulfill a role that I need? Alright? And when you're thinking in that process of what do I need, you're thinking along the lines of what a mon does during the actual battle itself, right? You're not just looking at like, it looks better on my type chart if I get, you know, a dark poison type or something along the sorts, you know? You're thinking along the lines of what do I need this mon to function as during the actual games myself. Now, that being said, there is a catch to this, alright? The tricky part is that oftentimes the role that you're drafting a mon for is its typing. Alright? Like, it would be extremely disingenuous to just assume that, like, what a mon does in its function is completely separate from its typing, right? Like, we all know that to be true. Obviously, what a mon does in its role during the battle is going to be contingent of its typing, right? For example, a lot of times, if you're looking for an ice resist, you'd be going, okay, I need an ice resist, therefore, I need a bulky water. But that is going to be a more productive line of thinking for you than, I just need a bulky water because, I don't know. Maybe you look at your draft and you have a steel type and you have a fire type and you don't really have many ice weaks and you're like, maybe I actually don't need maybe I actually don't need an ice resist. And then you would look to draft something else other than a water type. Rather than going, I don't have a water type. I need a water type because I need a water type. And I think that's something that's pretty easy for draft players to fall into that is generally going to be less conducive to building an actual quality roster. While a typing might fit your team, my point in this video is that you should be looking deeper than that, alright? You should be trying to shift your mindset between, I need this mon because it's X typing, to I need this mon because it does something that my roster lacks. I need my roster to cover something. So, to make this a little more concrete, we can look at an actual example. If we're drafting a Deoxys speed team, we draft this guy in the first round, he's great, right? But he doesn't do everything. Now, with that being said, if we look at what he doesn't do, we can look at some of the things that we might want to draft later on. We might want something to break dark types. We might want something to switch into ghost and dark type attacks. This guy doesn't have a lot of bulk. He's not really going to be able to stomach a whole lot of ghost and dark types. We also might want something to hit steel types, you know? It gets like superpower, but if it's not psycho boosting things, it's really not going to be doing an insane amount of damage. You don't want your Deoxys speed to be trading blows back and forth. It's not good at that. And also, more specifically, you probably also want a knockoff switch, right? It's the most common dark type move in the game by far. You're going to be facing up against a lot of them week after week. If there's any one move you want to be prepared for, if you are a Deoxys speed team, it is going to be knockoff. So, if we look at all of these things combined, you might go, okay, I need a dark type. But if you go and draft like a low kicks or something, is it actually going to function as something to switch into dark types? No. Is it actually going to switch into ghost types? No. Does it actually want to eat a knockoff? Not really. Does it actually hit steel types? Kind of. Sometimes, if you can fit a fighting move, a lot of times you can't. A lot of times it's slower, and again, since it's so frail, it's not going to be able to provide the defensive counterplay you want out of a dark type on a Deoxys speed roster. Something that's not a dark type that actually fulfills a lot of these criteria is going to be something like this Conkelder. It switches into dark type moves, it breaks dark types very easily, it hits steel types very easily, and it's one of the best knockoff switches in the game. Especially if you're that Flame Orb set, if you are burned beforehand, you switch in a knockoff, you take almost nothing, and you also don't even care about losing your item. So that's going to be a fantastic example of drafting for a role. You know, and instead of just going, okay, I have Deoxys speed, I need a dark type. You go, okay, I have a Deoxys speed, here are the things I need. What fulfills these roles? This is also going to be contextualized by what you have previously drafted. For example, if you already have a fairy type, right? You have something that is going to be able to break dark types. You have something that's going to be able to switch into dark types. You might be going, okay, I already have these top two. I need something to tick these bottom two, right? Something to hit steel types and something to switch into knockoff. You might then look at Gliscor. Again, one of the best knockoff switches in the game due to its lack of reliance on an item once you already have that toxic going, and also its great ability to hit steel types. If you already have a fairy, you're in the context of this team, you have Deoxys speed and you already have a fairy. You go, okay, I don't need these top two any longer. I do need these bottom two. And now, even though you might not initially think of, okay, I have this psychic type, I need this ground flying type, that doesn't really make sense. That doesn't transition well into the other. But when you think about what they actually do in the battle, again, another fantastic pairing in the right context. And that's why it's so important to be looking at the rules that these Pokemon actually fulfill during the battle. So, that is just the main takeaway. If I can get you to walk away with any one thing during this video, it's that the first and foremost thing that you should be thinking about is what it does during the game. Less important is the type that it fulfills and like the little check mark it checks on your little type charts, right? This does not mean you should completely ignore what type a mon is, right? Obviously, I'm not saying completely forsake the typing chart, alright? It also doesn't mean like ignore defensive weaknesses that overlap on your team. For example, if you have a defensive core like Toxapex and Corviknight, right? They both share a weakness to electric type. That is obviously going to be way worse than having like Gyarados and Moltres together, right? Or Gyarados, what's a better example? Gyarados and Articuno together, right? You don't really need either of those mons to be like a defensive piece, right? They don't need to like work off of each other and switch into each other. It's not really their job. It's to like break things offensively. So if they share weaknesses, it's much worse than like a context of two defensive mons sharing a weakness. And in that regard, like yeah, you obviously can't ignore typings, but two mons that are meant to be defensive switch-ins care much more about that type chart than offensive mons. Obviously, offensive mons care about the type chart too, right? If your whole team is like walled by the same thing, again, you need to be looking at something else in the draft. But offensively, you should be looking at what does this previous guy I drafted need help breaking. That will be, again, a much more productive line of thinking, and it's going to leave you with much more quality drafts in the long run, I think. Don't be afraid to overlap on typings. Again, pretty much any good draft will overlap on typings at some point. Sometimes it's even really good to overlap on typings, especially offensively if you're able to break for each other. So, that's just going to be a short video on what my thoughts are on this topic today. Again, don't be afraid of sharing types, alright? It's really no big deal. But, if you've made it this far, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe. Join King's Court Pokemon League. Description below. And have a great day. I hope everyone has a great week up ahead. Thank you very much for watching.